So if you are sick and tired of taking photos that look flat and two-dimensional, this video is for you. In this video, I'll share with you 5 techniques to fix your flat photos and make them pop every single time. Also, this video is supported by DxO Labs and they have given me this coupon code that you can use within Easter to get 20% off on all of their products if you are a new customer. And frankly, I feel this is a really good deal. And I'm not saying this because I want you to buy from my affiliate link, but actually I'm tired of paying for Adobe subscription model for a long time and it feels like a trap, and DxO has better softwares, better algorithms, better photo editing, and you also pay only once and use the software for lifetime. So it really is a good deal. So if you want, you can check it out. Now, before we discuss these 5 techniques on fixing flat photos and making them pop every single time, let's try to understand first what is the problem behind flat looking photos, why photos look flat, and why people find it boring. Now, this will give an idea of what is the problem, why we are fixing it, and how we are fixing it, right? Now, the problem with a flat looking photo is that you cannot really identify the subject from the background instantly. This means your brain and eyes have to work really hard to identify what's going on with that photo. What is the subject? What is the story? What is the context? Everything becomes hard to understand. Now, every human being has around approximately 2 seconds to decide if the photo is boring or not. People like photos that are easy to understand instantly. We don't want to spend a lot of time trying to understand a photo. That's not our job as a viewer. That's the photo's job to actually make it easier for us to understand the scene, right? That's why flat photos fail, because they make it so hard to understand what's going on. So when we talk about fixing flat photos, we are actually talking about separating the subject from the background. We are actually trying to make a photo easier to understand and perceive, right? This is called background separation. When you separate subject from the background, basically your photo becomes three-dimensional, right? Your photo becomes closer to reality. So if you want your photos to look more three-dimensional, alive and real, if you want your photos to pop, then you need to add depth in your photos. And there are 5 easy techniques to do that. A lot of photographers take a photo with the light coming behind from your camera, right? Or behind you. This is a very common mistake that photographers do. So let me give you an example. Right now, in this photo, I am facing a window where the natural light is coming directly on my face and lighting the whole scene evenly. This means that all the shadows are now gone. Now without shadows, you don't have any contrast in the scene, and also you don't have any shapes to your subject. This means that your photos now look flat. You cannot easily identify your subject from the background, and you don't know the context. This is where shadows come in. Shadows bring shape to your subject and give contrast to the scene. So in order to fix this, all you need to do is light your subject from the side. Either move yourself or move the source of the light a bit to the sideways. Now in this photo, I've closed the window. The natural light is not hitting me directly anymore. And now I'm using a studio light on my right to basically illuminate the right hand side of my face. This scene has more contrast because the left hand side is under shadows. So now me and my face are easily separated from the background. This shot looks more alive and dynamic. You can actually see the texture and shapes just because of the contrast between highlights and shadows in this scene. So just by changing the direction of the light and how I'm illuminating the subject, which is my face in this context, I was able to create depth in this scene between myself and the background, and I was able to make this shot look more three-dimensional and make it more pop. Now, light is not the only way to add depth in your photos. You can also do that with layering. Now, most photos have a subject and a background, right? Now, this is fine, but it also makes your photos look flat and two-dimensional, especially if the subject is not properly separated from the background. These photos do not have any sense of depth or context. You feel that the subject and background are existing on the same plane, right? It's very difficult to understand what's going on. So in layering, we try to create a three-dimensional world inside a two-dimensional photo. And we do this by dividing your photo into 3 layers: a midground layer, a background layer, and a foreground layer. The midground layer is where your subject resides or exists. Background layer is anything behind the subject, and foreground layer is anything in front of the subject. And the foreground layer is the magic, because the moment you introduce an element before the subject in your photo in the foreground layer, your photo starts to pop. It becomes three-dimensional because the brain now starts to perceive it as a three-dimensional world, and the brain thinks that there are distance between foreground, subject and background. For example, this photo looks very flat. All the elements in this photo appear to be on the same plane. There is no sense of depth or context. However, if I introduce something in the foreground just before the subject, now immediately you have a sense of depth. You feel that this is now a 3D world and the photo or the scene starts to pop. Now you can go crazy with layering and add more depth. So for example, you can add a little light in the background to create an illusion of more distance from the subject and actually enhance background separation. Or you can introduce leading lines in the foreground to basically create a sense of depth in your photos, which is actually a very effective technique. Till now, we have manipulated the elements of a scene to fix a flat photo and add depth. But do you know that you can also do that just by changing the way you shoot? And the biggest example of that is by changing your shooting angle. Now, usually people take photos like this, straight on their eye level. If you take photos on your eye level, chances are that you will get a flat photo and all the elements in the scene will look to be in the same plane. It actually removes any sense of distance between the subject and the background. Now the good news is you can fix this literally in an instant. All you need to do is, instead of standing and taking photos in your eye level, you need to go down. You need to shoot at a lower angle. The moment you shoot from a lower angle, you introduce depth and distance between the layers in your photo. Your foreground comes closer, your background drops back further away, your subject appears bigger. Instead, the whole scene appears bigger and larger than life. Also, when you are shooting at a lower angle, you can essentially replace your background with something with high contrast, like a sky, or with distance, or with blur. All of these things work to make your photos pop. They fix the flatness of your photo instantly. But remember that shooting at a lower angle will not introduce contrast in your photos. Your photos should already have a nice balance between highlights and shadows and have a nice contrast for this to work. Now, another way to add depth in your photos and make them pop is by shooting closer to your subject. You see, if the elements in your scene are far away, they will always look flat and two-dimensional. Whereas if your subject starts coming closer to you, it will feel more real and three-dimensional. Right? And this is especially true if your subject is within the focusing distance of your lens, right? So all you need to do to create some background separation is to shoot closer to your subject. When you shoot closer to your subject, it basically makes the subject appear bigger and the background appears to be more compressed, and your foreground, midground and background layers appear to be more visibly separated. It creates a sense of distance and depth in your photos. That's why portrait photographers love this, because it makes the subject look more 3D and real. So at this point, we have done everything we can to fix a flat photo and make it pop. And we know that we can do this by adding depth in the photos and separate the subject from the background. So this brings us to the last and the easiest technique to do background separation in your photos and add depth in your photos, which is contrast. You see, contrast is the difference between the light and dark areas of the photo, or highlights and shadows, or it can also be the difference between contrasting colors in a photo. If your contrast is low, then your photos look flat and two-dimensional, whereas if your contrast is high, I mean not too high, your photos will look more three-dimensional and hyper-realistic. All we need to do is have the subject and background in opposite colors or contrasting lighting conditions. When you create a contrast with highlights and shadows, it is called tonal contrast, and when you create a contrast using opposite colors, it's called color separation. The biggest example for this are minimalist photos, right? In minimalistic photos, all you see is a background and a subject. There is no foreground, but still you can easily identify the subject because of the high contrast in those photos. Right, so this is it. Now you can easily fix a flat photo and make your photos pop instantly using these 5 techniques. You don't need any fancy camera gear, you don't need new camera settings. All you need to do is use these 5 techniques and practice, right? Right, so I hope you enjoyed this video and you got something out of it. If you really enjoyed this video and you want to see content like this from me, you need to tell YouTube, right? So all you need to do is subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and also give this video a thumbs up. This will tell the YouTube algorithm what you want. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, thanks for giving me your time. Keep taking photos, enjoy photography. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.